Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes they feel like businesses just, well, they just exist. But have you ever really stopped to wonder what happens behind the scenes?
Mhm.
Like when a huge company gets slammed by a hurricane or a massive power outage, maybe even a really sophisticated cyber attack.
Yeah, how do they keep things running? Or bounce back so fast?
Exactly. How do they manage that? That's the fascinating question we're tackling today.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these seemingly abstract concepts like availability aren't just IT buzzwords. They translate into incredibly real, tangible plans for an organization's actual survival.
Right.
So today's deep dive isn't just about definitions. It's really about giving you a practical blueprint for how organizations build that resilience, making sure they can perform vital business functions and meet their objectives no matter what kind of curveball the world throws at them.
That's right. Today we're diving deep into the world of availability, resiliency, and disaster recovery. We're going to unpack the crucial steps businesses take to protect themselves, their data, and, frankly, their entire existence. So let's kick things off with maybe the most fundamental concept. What exactly do we mean by availability? It's definitely more than just, are the computers switched on?
Oh, much more. In a business context, availability means, yes, business data is accessible, IT systems are operating normally, but also, and this is key, that an organization's human capital, its people, are ready and able to perform their normal operations.
Ah, okay, so it's the whole package, people included.
Precisely. It's about a complete state of readiness. The insight here is that availability isn't just some IT metric on a dashboard. It's a fundamental measure of an organization's trustworthiness, its long-term viability.
And if that fails?
Well, when that trust is lost, even relatively minor periods of paused operations or system downtime can cause these huge ripple effects. We're talking loss of revenue, critical data loss, losing customer trust, and ultimately losing the customers themselves.
Yeah, that sounds serious.
It is. So evaluating and actively mitigating these risks through robust business resiliency programs isn't just, good practice. It's absolutely critical for survival these days.
And that leads us perfectly to this integrated concept you mentioned, business resiliency. That's the overarching strategy, right? Like the umbrella term.
Exactly. Think of it like a highly trained emergency response team for a business, but all coordinated.
Okay, I like that analogy.
It's a central set of procedures that combines various specialists: system availability controls, disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, and crisis management plans. They all work together.
Got it. So it's all designed to ensure a business can either keep operating through a disruption or get back to normal really quickly without, irreparable harm.
Precisely. And right at the heart of that big strategy, a really major component of any solid business resiliency program is disaster recovery. We often call it DAR.
DAR. Okay.
Now, when we talk about DR, we're specifically looking at an entity's plans for restoring and continuing its information technology function. This isn't just about getting a few files back.
Right, not just undeleting something.
No. It's about the entire computer processing capability, especially in the event of major destruction. We're talking about situations where processing cannot be quickly reestablished at the original site, a true disaster, not just a temporary glitch.
Okay, so a major event. If that kind of disaster does strike and your main IT systems are basically gone, what are the key steps an organization needs to take in its disaster recovery plan?
Well, there are 5 key steps they generally follow. First, you absolutely have to assess the specific risks. What are you actually facing? Hurricanes, cyber attacks, power grid failures.
Makes sense. Know your enemy.
Exactly. Second, identify those mission-critical applications and data. What absolutely must be up and running for the business to function at a basic level.
The essentials.
The essentials. Third, develop a detailed plan specifically for handling those mission-critical applications. How will they be recovered? Where? Fourth, clearly determine the responsibilities of all the personnel involved. Who does what during the recovery? Everyone needs to know their role cold.
No confusion in a crisis.
None. And finally, step 5, you absolutely must test that disaster recovery plan regularly. Make sure it actually works before you need it for real.
Testing is crucial. Okay, now this is where I think it gets really interesting and strategic. Your main IT site is down. What are the actual options for alternative processing facilities? I know there are different types, right? Let's start with the cold site. What is that?
Right. The cold site, think of it as an empty shell, basically. It's an off-site location that has all the necessary electrical connections, cooling, physical space, the infrastructure requirements for data processing, but it doesn't have the actual computer equipment.
Ah, okay, so it's just the room. essentially.
Pretty much. The key trade-off here is time versus cost. It's the least costly option up front, but it typically takes, say, 1 to 3 days to actually be made operational because you have to ship in, install, and configure all the hardware, which is often generic stuff.
So if a company can afford to be down for a day or three, this might be the budget-friendly choice. What if you need something faster?
Then you might look at a warm site. This is kind of the middle ground, a compromise between cold and hot. It's a facility that already has some hardware installed, maybe servers, network gear, but it usually won't have the full processing power or the exact configuration of the primary site.
So partially equipped.
Partially equipped, yeah. It can typically be made operational faster than a cold site, maybe anywhere from, say, 0 to 3 days, depending on how much setup is still needed. It strikes a balance. It's more expensive than a cold site, but less expensive than a hot site.
Okay, that makes sense. And then for businesses where literally every minute counts, where downtime is just not an option, that's the hot site, right?
That's the hot site. Exactly. This is an off-site location that is fully equipped and ready to take over the company's data processing almost immediately.
Wow, immediately.
Yeah, these locations are pre-wired. They include all the necessary hardware, servers, storage, network connections, even office equipment like phones and desks. Often, they have real-time or near real-time backup copies of essential data files and programs already loaded.
So turnkey recovery.
Pretty much, it's operational almost instantly, which, as you might guess, makes it the most expensive option by far.
I bet.
But the crucial takeaway here, I think, isn't just about the upfront cost. It's that the least expensive option upfront, the cold site, could end up being the most expensive in the long run if you factor in lost revenue, lost customer trust, market share erosion because your recovery window was too long.
That's a really important point. It's optimizing for survival, not just initial savings.
Exactly. It's a strategic decision based on how much pain, how much downtime your specific business can actually withstand.
Okay, so we've covered the IT lifeline with disaster recovery, the cold, warm, hot sites. But what about keeping the entire business running, not just the computers? That's where business continuity plans, or BCPs, come in, right?
That's absolutely right. BCPs are generally more comprehensive than just DR plans. They're focused on keeping the entire business operational, going beyond just the IT functions.
How so? What else do they cover?
Well, they cover all the critical business processes. That could include things like physically relocating facilities if the primary one is unusable, handling human resource tasks like payroll or employee support during a disruption, and actively managing relationships with key customers and suppliers to minimize impact.
So it's much broader than just getting servers back online. What are the core things a good BCP needs to really think about?
A solid BCP needs to systematically do a few things. Identify the key business processes, what really makes the business tick. Then, pinpoint the risks within those specific processes. After that, determine the acceptable downtime for each of those key processes. How long can sales be down? How long can manufacturing wait?
Right, different tolerances for different parts of the business.
Exactly. And finally, implement concrete mitigation and contingency plans to address those identified risks and potential downtimes. What's Plan B? Plan C.
Let's make this concrete. Our sources mention an example, Health One Inc., a health insurance company. Can you walk us through their BCP approach?
Sure. Health One reviews their BCP annually, which is good practice. When hurricanes threaten their operations, a very real risk for them, their plan anticipates that even remote employees might lose internet access.
Okay.
So their plan isn't just hoping for the best. It involves proactively relocating a core team to a secure secondary facility that has guaranteed internet and phone access. And critically, something they did years ago, they moved their key applications to the cloud.
Ah, the cloud advantage.
Absolutely. That move means the relocated team can basically pick up where they left off and resume critical operations almost instantly, even if their main office is completely inaccessible. It shows foresight.
That's a great example of planning ahead. And you mentioned auditing. How does this get verified?
Right. Well, during something called a SOC2 engagement, that's a type of audit focused on service organizations' controls, the auditors actually verify this BCP testing. They look for specific things.
Like what?
They check if the plan was based on relevant scenarios. Did they test for plausible events? Did it focus on components that could significantly impair the company if they failed? Did it consider scenarios where key personnel might be unavailable? And, importantly, was the plan periodically revised based on the actual results of those tests?
So they check that it's not just a dusty binder sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Exactly. It has to be a living, tested document.
Okay, so beyond regular business disruptions, we also face the possibility of true crises. Big, unexpected events. That's where crisis management plans, CM, fit in.
That's right. CM plans are for the big ones. We define a crisis as an unexpected large-scale incident that can cause major negative effects on an organization. And its stakeholders think public health emergencies, massive data breaches that hit the news, major industrial
And
accidents.
really damaging stuff.
Yeah, the truly devastating events. The primary goals of crisis management plans are, first, to lessen the immediate impact of the crisis. Second, protect people, employees, customers, the public. Third, safeguard the organizational reputation, which can take a huge hit. And fourth, return to normal operations as swiftly and smoothly as possible. It's really about navigating chaos effectively.
And what should a good crisis management policy actually include? What are the components?
It needs to be comprehensive. It should systematically address several vital areas. A thorough risk assessment focused on potential crises specifically. Clear implementation procedures for exactly what to do when a crisis hits. Often establishing a dedicated crisis response command center.
Like a war room.
Kind of, yeah. Clearly defining roles and responsibilities, who's in charge, who speaks to the media, who handles internal comms. Establishing those internal and external communication lines is critical for managing the message. And, of course, proper employee training so people know what to do and what not to do. It's about being ready to react quickly, decisively, and cohesively.
Okay, so we got several terms floating around. Business resiliency, disaster recovery, business continuity, crisis management. Can you give us a quick way to keep them straight, a sort of pass key?
Sure, let's try a quick summary. Think of business resiliency as the overall big picture integration of all these plans and procedures designed to keep operations running smoothly or recover quickly.
The umbrella.
The umbrella, exactly. Then disaster recovery, DR, focuses specifically on recovering IT functions in infrastructure after a major event.
Just IT.
Primarily IT. Business continuity, BC, zooms out a bit to focus on keeping all critical business processes running, including the non-IT operational and personnel functions.
Beyond IT.
Right. And finally, crisis management, CM, deals with those large-scale, often public-facing incidents that pose a significant threat to the organization's reputation and viability, the true crises.
Okay, that helps clarify. DR for IT, BC for operations, CM for major crises, and resiliency is the whole strategy. It's like a layered defense system.
A layered defense, precisely. Each part plays a critical role.
Layered defense indeed. But okay, how do organizations actually figure out what needs the most protection? How do they quantify these risks and decide where to put their money and effort? That sounds like a job for the business impact analysis, or BIA. What is that exactly?
The BIA is absolutely crucial. It's a key component in building any effective business resiliency program. Its core purpose is twofold. First, to identify the business units, departments, and processes that are absolutely essential to the entity's survival.
Finding the crown jewels.
Finding the crown jewels, yes. And second, it meticulously assesses the potential organizational impact, financial, operational, reputational, if any of those essential elements fail or are disrupted.
Okay.
And the real power of the BIA, I think, isn't just in identifying risks. It's that it provides a common language supported by data for technical folks and business leaders to agree on investment priorities. It turns abstract threats into concrete, budget-justifying information.
So it helps bridge that gap between IT and the business side.
Definitely. It helps everyone understand not just if something is critical, but how quickly it absolutely needs to be back online after a disruption, and what resources, people, systems, facilities are required to make that happen.
How does it typically categorize the potential impact of losing a resource or process?
Generally, impacts are categorized into 3 levels, often using something like high, moderate, and low. High, H impact. This means a department literally cannot operate without this resource. The recovery cost would be very high, or maybe the organization would fundamentally fail to meet its core objectives or maintain its reputation if this goes down. Think critical patient systems in a hospital. Moderate M impact. Here, a department could maybe partially function temporarily, say for a period of days or maybe a week, without the resource. There would be some recovery costs, and it might hinder meeting objectives or slightly damage reputation, but it's not catastrophic immediately. low L impact. In this case, a department could operate pretty well for an extended period without the resource. There might be some noticeable effect on achieving objectives or maintaining reputation down the line, but it's not an immediate crisis.
High, moderate, low. Clear enough. So how do you actually do a BIA? What are the practical steps involved?
There's a systematic process, typically involving 7 crucial steps. First, you establish the BIA approach. This means defining your impact types, like the high, medium, low we just discussed, setting the criteria for each, establishing timeframes for recovery, and deciding on the methodology you'll use, like surveys or workshops.
Setting the ground rules.
Exactly. Second, you identify critical resources. This involves meticulously defining those critical business functions and mapping out the IT resources, data, personnel, and facilities they depend on. You also highlight known vulnerabilities here.
Mapping dependencies, okay?
Third, you define disruption impacts. This is where you evaluate the effects of losing a resource over different time periods. What's the impact after an hour, a day, a week? You identify all the affected resources and consider various types of threats, natural disasters, human errors, technical failures, cyber attacks, you name it.
And then comes the money part, right?
Yeah.
Estimating the cost.
That's step 4. Estimate losses. Here, you list the potential risks you identified and try to assign a probability to them. This often involves calculating something called the annualized rate of occurrence, or ARO, basically. How often do we expect this bad thing to happen per year?
Okay, ARO. Got it.
Fifth, you establish recovery priorities. Based on the impact analysis and how much outage time each resource can truly tolerate, often called the maximum tolerable downtime, or MTD, you prioritize which recovery tasks personnel should tackle first.
Triage.
Triage, exactly. Sixth, you create the BIA report. You compile all this data, critical functions, impacts, dependencies, recovery priorities, potential losses, into comprehensive reports for different levels of the organization, from departmental summaries to executive overviews.
And finally, action.
Yes, step 7 is implement BIA recommendations. Senior management reviews the report, evaluates the findings and recommendations, and then takes decisive action, maybe investing in new controls, updating recovery plans, or accepting certain risks. It should be a continuous cycle, reviewing and updating the BIA periodically.
That sounds incredibly thorough, but also potentially complex.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really practical, I think, because we can actually put a dollar figure on these risks. Let's use the example from our sources. Build Tech Inc. They're a manufacturing company making construction equipment.
Right.
They're doing their BIA and looking at potential losses. A key concern for them is partial flooding in the southern part of their $5 million data center. This part processes crucial analytics for their proprietary software, which is embedded in their equipment. This specific area represents 40% of the data center's value.
Okay.
And based on historical data and weather patterns, they estimate this type of flooding happens, on average, once every 20 years. How do they calculate their potential annual loss from just this one specific risk?
Okay. This is where the BIA calculations become really valuable for decision-making.
Yeah.
First, Build Tech needs their annualized rate of occurrence, ARO.
Right, and how often it happens per year.
Exactly. Since it occurs once every 20 years, the ARO is 1 divided by 20, which equals 0.05.
Okay, 0.05, or a 5% chance in any given year. Makes sense.
Precisely. Next, they need the exposure factor, EF. This represents the percentage of the asset's value that would be lost in a single event.
Which was 40% for the affected part of the data center.
Correct. So the EF is 0.40. Now, using these, they calculate the single loss expectancy, SLE. This is the estimated cost of one single occurrence of that flooding event.
How do you get that?
You multiply the exposure factor, EF, by the asset value, AV. So for Build Tech, it's 0.40 multiplied by $5,000.
Which is $2 million.
Right. $2 million is the expected cost each time that specific type of flood happens. That's a significant potential hit from a single event.
Definitely gets your attention. So how do they translate that into an annual figure for budgeting?
That's the final step, calculating the annualized loss expectancy, ALE. This represents the expected cost of this specific loss averaged out over a year. You get this by multiplying the single loss expectancy, SLE, by the annualized rate of occurrence, ARO.
So the $2 million SLE times the 0.05 ARO.
Exactly. $2 million multiplied by 0.05 equals $100,000.
$100,000 per year.
Per year, on average. So Build Tech can now say, based on this analysis, we can reasonably expect to lose $100,000 annually due to this specific flooding risk. This isn't just pulling a number out of thin air. It's a data-driven estimate.
And that $100,000 figure Gives them a benchmark, right?
Yeah.
They can use it to decide how much it's worth spending on flood prevention or mitigation for that part of the data center.
Precisely. If a mitigation strategy costs, say, $50,000 a year, but eliminates that $100,000 ALE, it's likely a very good investment. It turns risk management into a quantifiable business decision.
That really puts a tangible number on what often feels like an abstract threat. Very powerful. So moving beyond these big picture plans and analyses, what are the specific day-to-day risks that constantly threaten system availability? And what kind of immediate controls do organizations use to fight them?
Well, you could argue that system availability is one of the largest ongoing risks many organizations face simply because technology underpins almost everything they do now. Common risks include, well, the straightforward failure of IT infrastructure. This could be due to outdated systems just wearing out, lack of proper maintenance, malware infections, or physical damage, natural disasters, fires, floods, political threats, even accidental damage by employees or malicious insider actions.
Lots of ways for hardware to fail.
Absolutely. And cyber attacks are a huge and growing threat, especially things like denial of service, DoS attacks, designed specifically to overwhelm systems and make them unavailable.
Right. What about internal factors, not just external attacks or disasters?
Good point. We also see significant risks from insufficient capacity and resources. This could mean the IT infrastructure servers, storage, network bandwidth simply can't keep up with the processing or storage demands of the business as it grows. Or maybe there's a lack of skilled staff to operate and maintain the systems properly.
So being overwhelmed from within.
Essentially, yes. And of course, tying back to our earlier discussion, a general lack of effective business resiliency planning will inevitably lead to slower recovery times or even permanent data loss when something does go wrong.
So how do companies combat these specific risks on a technical level? What controls ensure ongoing access?
There are several key IT processes and controls. One is mirroring. This typically involves copying a database, often in real time, to another machine. If the primary database server fails, the system can immediately switch over to the mirrored copy, providing data redundancy and minimizing downtime.
Like an instant spare.
Pretty much. Another related technique is replication. This involves copying and transferring data between different databases, potentially at different physical sites, maybe replicating data from your primary data center to a cloud environment or a geographically separate backup data center. This allows for quick resumption of operations from the replica site if the primary site fails completely.
So mirroring is usually within the same location. Replication is often between locations.
That's a common distinction, yes, though the terms can sometimes overlap. The goal for both is redundancy and faster recovery.
Okay. What else keeps the digital lights on?
Another important control is having secondary internet sources. Especially for critical locations, having internet connections from two different providers is common. Or, for temporary outages, having cellular hotspots ready as a backup can be a lifesaver.
Always have a backup connection. Makes sense. And you mentioned metrics earlier. How do companies measure this stuff?
Yes, metrics are key for understanding and improving availability. We often see agreed service time, AST, and downtime, DT, defined in service level agreements, SLAs, especially when dealing with third-party service providers.
SLAs.
Internally, a critical metric is the maximum tolerable downtime, MTD, which we touched on with the BIA. That's the absolute longest the business can afford to have a specific system or process down without causing significant long-term harm.
The breaking point.
Essentially. Then there's the recovery point objective, RPO. This defines the maximum acceptable amount of data loss measured in time. Are we okay losing the last hour of data, the last 24 hours? That dictates how frequently backups need to happen.
So RPO is about data loss tolerance. What about time to recover?
That's the recovery time objective, RTO. This sets the target for the maximum time allowed to restore business operations to a specific service level after a failure. For example, a critical system might have an RTO of no longer than 4 hours.
Okay, RPO for data loss, RTO for recovery time.
Exactly. We also measure mean time to repair, MTTR, which is the average time it takes to actually repair a failed device or component. And finally, after a real incident, you measure your recovery time actual, RTA, and recovery point actual, RPA, did you meet your objectives. These metrics are crucial for tracking performance and driving improvements.
That's a lot of acronyms, but they all measure critical aspects of keeping things running. Beyond the technical processes, what about the physical environment? Protecting the actual servers and equipment.
Physical controls are fundamental. We're talking about things like strong door locks, maybe biometric access controls, security guards, surveillance cameras, CCTV. Also crucial are environmental controls. Robust fire detection and suppression systems like sprinklers or gas-based systems. Facility design is important too, things like raised floors to protect against minor flooding and allow for cabling, and dedicated air conditioning HVAC systems to prevent overheating.
Keeping the machines safe and cool.
Right. And on the IT infrastructure side itself, you have controls like anti-malware software, rigorous patch management to fix vulnerabilities, periodic reviews to identify and replace outdated or unsupported components, strong network security measures like firewalls and intrusion detection systems, and granular logical access controls ensuring only authorized users can access specific systems and data based on their roles.
It's layers upon layers of protection. What about power? Everything stops if the power goes out.
Yeah.
I often hear about a UPS. What exactly does that do?
Ah, the uninterrupted power supply, or UPS. It's absolutely vital. A UPS is essentially a battery backup system that sits between the main power supply and your critical equipment, like servers or network gear.
So it keeps things running on battery.
For a short time, yes. Its main job is to maintain a continuous supply of clean electrical power. If the main utility power flickers or cuts out completely, the UPS instantly kicks in and provides power from its batteries. This prevents an abrupt shutdown, which can corrupt data, especially during write operations or backups. It gives systems enough time to either shut down gracefully or for a backup generator to start up and take over for longer outages.
So it's not a generator replacement, it's that critical bridge.
Exactly. It provides instantaneous but temporary power. It smooths out power fluctuations and bridges that gap until stable power is restored or a longer-term source like a generator is online. Absolutely essential for data integrity and system protection.
Got it. Critical short-term protection. Yeah. And building on that idea of having spares and backups, there's the broader concept of redundancy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Redundancy is a core principle in availability. It basically means having duplicate or extra components, hardware, software, network paths, storage, so that if one fails, another can immediately take its place without disrupting service.
Like having two engines on an airplane.
Good analogy. For hardware, this could mean having redundant power supplies in a server, multiple network interface cards, or even entire duplicate servers ready to take over failover clustering. For storage, a very common example is RAID, redundant arrays of independent drives.
RAID, I've heard of that.
Yeah, RAID uses multiple physical disk drives and combines them in various ways. Some RAID levels focus on performance, others focus specifically on redundancy by mirroring data across multiple drives or using parity information. So if one disk drive in the array fails, the system keeps running using the other drives, and the data is still safe and accessible. You can then replace the failed drive without downtime.
So redundancy is all about eliminating single points of failure.
That's the goal, having that extra capacity or duplicate component ready to step in automatically, ensuring continuous operation and data protection.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into the absolute art of the backup. Having copies of your data is fundamental. This must be critical for any organization, right? How do they approach system backups for data recovery?
Oh, it's non-negotiable. Backups are the last line of defense against data loss in so many scenarios. Hardware failure, corruption, ransomware, accidental deletion. There are three main types of system backups, and each one involves different trade-offs, mainly between how long they take to create versus how long they take to restore from.
Okay, what's the first type?
The first, and perhaps simplest conceptually, is a full backup. As the name suggests, this is an exact copy of the entire database or file system at a specific point in time.
And everything gets copied.
Everything. The advantage is that restoration is generally the fastest and simplest process because you only need that one single backup file or set to restore everything. Grab the latest full backup, restore it, and you're done.
Sounds good. What's the downside?
The downside is that full backups can be very time-consuming and resource-intensive to create, especially for large amounts of data. They also require the most storage space. Because of this, many organizations only perform full backups periodically, maybe once a week, or even less frequently.
Okay, so simple restore, but slow and big to create. What's the next option if you need to back up more frequently?
The next option is an incremental backup. This type copies only the data items that have changed since the last backup was made, regardless of whether that last backup was a full one or another incremental one.
Only the changes since the very last backup run.
Exactly. This makes incremental backups incredibly fast to create, often taking just minutes. They also use the least amount of storage space for each backup job. That's why they're very popular for daily or even more frequent backups.
Fast and small sounds great. What's the catch?
The catch comes during restoration. Recovery from incremental backups is generally the slowest and most complex process. To get a full recovery, you need to first restore the last full backup, and then you need to restore every single subsequent incremental backup in the correct chronological order, one after the other.
Well, like assembling a chain.
Precisely. If any one of those incremental backups in the sequence is missing or corrupted, you might not be able to recover fully up to the point you need. It can be a bit of a jigsaw puzzle.
Okay, so full is simple restore but slow create. Incremental is fast create but complex restore. Is there a middle ground?
There is, and that's the differential backup. A differential backup copies all the changes that have been made since the last full backup.
Wait, say that again? Since the last full backup?
Yes, since the last full backup. So the first differential backup after a full backup copies all changes since the full. The second differential backup copies all changes since the full backup, including those captured in the first differential plus any new ones. The third copies all changes since the full, and so on.
Ah, so each differential file gets progressively larger.
Correct. Because it's cumulative relative to the last full backup. This means differential backups take longer to create than incremental backups, but they're still generally faster than creating another full backup.
Okay, so slower to create than incremental, but faster than full. What about restoration?
Restoration is where differential backups offer an advantage over incremental. To do a full restore, you only need two things: the last full backup and the single most recent differential backup. You restore the full, then apply the latest differential, and you're done. Much simpler and faster than restoring a potentially long chain of incrementals.
Okay, that does sound like a good balance. Full backup plus just the latest differential.
Exactly. It trades slightly longer backup times compared to incremental for significantly faster and simpler recovery. Many organizations find this balance appealing.
That's a really clear breakdown of the trade-offs. Let's look at that real-world example again. The IT director at a university managing their backups. They do full backups twice a month, which take hours, and then daily incremental backups. What does that strategy tell you?
That combination tells me they're likely prioritizing fast daily backup windows. The incrementals are very quick, minimizing the impact on system performance during busy university hours. They accept that a full restore, while potentially needed less often, will be more complex because they'll need the last full backup plus potentially many daily incremental files.
So they're optimizing for backup speed over restore speed.
It seems that way, yes. It's a common and perfectly valid strategy, especially if full restores are rare, and minimizing daily backup impact is paramount. They get that solid baseline twice a month with the fulls and capture daily changes efficiently with the incrementals. But it raises an important question I'd have as an auditor.
What?
Have they thoroughly and regularly tested the entire restore process using that full backup, plus all the necessary subsequent incrementals? Given the potential complexity, proving that restore process works reliably is absolutely critical.
Right, the testing again.
Always the testing. And this ties directly into how, for instance, SOC2 auditors evaluate availability controls. They don't just look at the plans, they look for evidence. They'll observe an organization's monitoring tools. Are they actually watching capacity metrics like CPU utilization, memory usage, disk I/O, network bandwidth? Are systems constantly running near their limits, risking slowdowns or failures?
Looking if they're monitoring the health of the systems.
Precisely. And they rigorously review the disaster recovery and business continuity plans, specifically looking for documentation and evidence of testing results. Did the tests simulate realistic scenarios? Were failures encountered? Were the plans updated based on lessons learned?
So it's not enough to just have a plan.
Not at all. This really raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider about any organization you rely on, or even your own setups. If these meticulously crafted plans aren't regularly tested under realistic conditions, or if system capacity isn't actively monitored and managed, the organization is flying blind. They risk not just significant downtime, but potentially catastrophic permanent data loss when not if disaster inevitably strikes.
It's about knowing if your safety net actually holds weight before you fall.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You need to know the parachute works before you jump out of the plane.
Wow. We have truly taken a deep dive today. We've gone from understanding that availability is about organizational trust, not just uptime, all the way to the nuts and bolts of backup types and BIA calculations. We've unpacked the differences between cold, warm, and hot sites, seeing how that's a strategic business call. We calculated the real financial risk of a potential flood for build tech and explored how Health One uses the cloud for resilience. It's a whole ecosystem.
It really is. And I think this raises a crucial final thought for everyone listening. In a world where disruption seems increasingly inevitable, whether it's a sophisticated cyber attack, a natural disaster, a supply chain issue, or just a simple power surge, how prepared is your organization? Or thinking even smaller, how prepared is your own personal digital life for the unexpected?
That's a sobering thought.
Understanding these concepts, availability, recovery points, recovery times, redundancy, tested plans, isn't just jargon for IT professionals anymore. In today's world, it's fundamentally about being strategically ready for whatever comes next.
Absolutely. So whether you're using this deep dive to prep for a crucial meeting, maybe get up to speed on this complex field, or if you're just insanely curious about how our digital world keeps spinning despite all the threats, we hope this discussion provided not just facts, but a robust framework. A new way, perhaps, to think about security, continuity, and resilience in a deeply practical way. What insights or questions stand out to you from today's deep dive?